"You won't survive without me." Those were his last words before he walked out the door, with another woman in the car and the sound of bags hitting the trunk like slaps to my face. At that moment, I was on my knees in the kitchen, my hands shaking with exhaustion and the dinner dishes still in the sink. My 3 children were asleep in the bedroom, unaware that their father had just abandoned us. My name is Helena. I am 35 years old, and for 10 years of my life I was married to Ricardo, the kind of man who talks a lot about traditional family, but doesn't think twice before throwing it in the trash like an empty container. I thought I knew the father of my children. I thought we were partners. I thought love was enough, but I was wrong. So wrong that it makes me angry just to remember the naivety that kept me trapped. Ricardo was always charming. He knew how to seduce an entire room with a well-placed joke and a crooked smile. That's how he won me over. At first, I felt chosen, special. He said I was the woman of his life, that he wanted to build something big with me, and I believed it. I quit my job, put my dreams on hold, and dove headfirst into motherhood and the role of the perfect wife. For years, I was the backbone of our home. I cooked, I did the laundry, I educated, I did the math. I held the fort when he disappeared for days at a time on business. And when he came home, tired and indifferent, I pretended not to care about the strange scent of perfume on his shirt or the deleted messages on his phone. Pretending became my routine, pretending that I was happy, pretending that he respected me, pretending that we were still a family. But nothing prepared me for the day he simply gave up. It was a cloudy Thursday. I remember it because the clouds were so low that they seemed to want to hide the world from me. He came home from work early, wearing a shirt I had never seen before, and without looking me in the eye, he said he was leaving. "I'm in love with someone else. I want to live for real now." You understand, right? To understand? I understood that he was throwing me into poverty with 3 small children, an overdue electricity bill, and 0 reais in the bank account because all the money was in his name. I understood that he didn't even have the decency to help me with a plan. He left no money, no car, no dignity. He took everything, and the worst part, he took our story as if it were his. That night, I sat on the living room floor and cried like I had never cried before. But there, amidst the sobs and broken promises, something inside me changed. It was as if a flame began to burn silently, a whisper born of pain saying, "You will rise, and when he realizes what he has lost, he will crawl." I just didn't know how yet, but one thing was certain. I would never again let someone else decide my worth. And this story is about how a broken woman rebuilds herself with her own hands and makes the man who scorned her watch it all, helpless, on his knees. I'd like to say that the betrayal was a shock, that it came out of nowhere. But the truth is that it had been building silently for a long time, like termites eating away at a house from the inside, until everything collapses with a bang. For months, Ricardo had been distancing himself. It started with being late for work, then came the coldness in conversations, the disappearing touches, the kisses given out of obligation. Until one day, while folding the children's clothes, I found a sweetly scented silk handkerchief tucked away in his pants pocket. A small detail, but it hurt more than a slap. I haven't confronted it. Not yet. In my mind, I had to keep the peace. The boys couldn't watch their mother fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, if I did everything even more right, if I loved more, talked less, cooked our favorite meals together, he'd look at me the way he used to. But deep down, I knew. The end had already happened. I was just grieving for a marriage that was still going strong. The trigger came one Sunday morning. The kids were playing in the living room, and I was trying to convince him to help me with the monthly budget. Lucas's school fees needed to be paid, and the refrigerator was almost empty. He got irritated with the conversation. He said I was dramatic, that everything was my problem, that he wasn't my father to support my crises. "You've made yourself useless, Helena. I always warned you. Now deal with it." Those words burned. He spat them out like someone who was getting rid of a weight, but he left that venom dripping inside me. That same day, he left without saying where he was going, and he came back at night, drunk, smiling, with red lipstick on his collar, as if the house was no longer his, as if we were unwanted guests in his life. And he still had the audacity to look at me and say, "By the way, I wanted you to know right away. I'm with Priscilla. I've been for months. She's easygoing, fun, not an anchor like you." Priscilla. The other one. She was young, pretty, full of life. She worked at his company. He was a secretary. I met her once. She looked at me like she already knew she was going to replace me. At that moment, something inside me shattered irreversibly. It wasn't just the carnal betrayal. It was the way he humiliated me, threw me to the ground like disposable trash, dehumanized me in front of my own home, my history, my children, and the worst came the next day. He came back to get some things, and he brought her. She came into my house, laughing, wearing high heels, as if she were entering conquered territory. They both laughed loudly and talked about traveling. They didn't even look at me. They grabbed their bags, clothes, and a very expensive watch, and left as if they were leaving a store, not a home. At the door, he turned around and said, "Good luck with the kids. I'm going to live. You should try. To live." That word hit me so hard that I wanted to scream. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at my children who were in the hallway, confused, too young to understand that their father was leaving, not just from the house, but from their lives. That night, we slept on the mattress in the living room because their room still smelled of strange perfume and hurt. And I made an oath. One day he will beg for a place in this house, but you will only find the door closed. I just didn't know how to start, but it was a matter of time. In the early days, I still believed he would come back, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't accept that someone who swore eternal love could simply disappear, as if the years lived were crumpled paper thrown away. But he didn't come back. And when I realized that he had not only left, but also left us in ruins, despair set in. It started with the bills, the electricity, the water, the rent, everything in his name. And now, everything is threatening to be cut off. I went to the bank to get some savings. I discovered that he had emptied our joint account days before he left. He only left her 1746. It wasn't even enough to buy diapers. And I had 3 children looking at me as if I was still the magical mother who could fix the world with a kiss. But I wasn't magical. I was exhausted, alone, in debt, hungry, and ashamed. I went to my mother for help, who always warned me about him. She welcomed me, but the "I told you so" came into her eyes. We never forget when we disappoint the people who raised us. For weeks, I was torn between looking for work and trying to keep the kids emotionally stable. They asked about their father. I made excuses. I said he was away on business, until the day when Lucas, the oldest, 7 years old, looked at me with teary eyes and said, "Daddy's new wife has a pool. Can we go there too?" I swallowed my tears and faked a smile, but inside, shame tore at me. Meanwhile, the world around me was moving away. Friends who used to come to our house for barbecues now avoided texting. Mothers at school whispered in the corners. At the bakery, I heard jokes like, "You have to know how to hold your husband, right?" I went from being a respected wife to that abandoned woman with 3 children in a matter of weeks. I spent nights crying hidden in the bathroom with a towel over my mouth so as not to wake the children. And one of those nights, I saw my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. I was a shadow, pale skin, dark circles under the eyes, hastily tied hair. Where was the woman who dreamed, who laughed, who believed in love, dead, buried with the promises he made to me? I started to feel angry. Anger not only at him, but at me, for having believed, for having kept quiet, for having been too passive. That abandonment wasn't just his, it was mine too. I abandoned myself to maintain a sick marriage. And there, on the cold bathroom floor, with a wet towel in my hands and my soul in pieces, I understood. Revenge begins when we stop asking for crumbs and start building our own empire, even if it's from the mud. And if he thought I was going to crawl, he did not yet know the strength of a wounded mother. The pain knocked me down, but the anger lifted me up. I didn't know exactly how to start over, but I knew I could no longer live in mourning for someone who was celebrating his freedom with another woman, in a new house, with a swimming pool and an imported car. It was time to break the cycle. I started from the ground up, literally. I cleaned houses for a while. It was the only job I could get quickly, and even though I had a business degree that had been on hold for years, I needed to put food on the table. My hands burned from the chemicals. My knee hurt. But there was something liberating about being on my feet, earning a living, however small. My routine was brutal. I dropped the kids off at school, took 2 buses, cleaned apartments until dusk, then came back, made dinner, helped with homework, and only slept when the last child was asleep. And even then, I woke up with a knot in my stomach from worry. But it was at this stage that something curious happened. In one of the houses I cleaned, the owner, Donna Carmem, an elegant, calm-spoken widow, noticed my tiredness. One day, she offered me tea, sat down with me and asked me, "What did you do before cleaning here?" I hesitated. I almost said nothing, as I had told myself so many times. But for some reason, I answered truthfully. I graduated in business administration. I always liked numbers, but I gave it all up to raise my children. Now, This is what happened. She looked at me steadily, as if she had read something inside me that I had already forgotten. Helena, we can keep talent for a while, but it never dies. It just needs the right push. It was that day that she offered me an opportunity to help me organize the finances of the women's association she was part of, voluntarily, without a salary at first, but with a promise. If you prove that you know what you're doing, I'll recommend you. I accepted. And for the first time in years, I felt my mind awaken. I spent nights studying spreadsheets, redoing formulas, using everything I learned in college and more. I relearned Excel, digital marketing, people management, all through free courses and videos on my cell phone while I cooked. Over time, I started attending events with these women. Most of them were small business owners. And it was there, in the middle of conversations about finance and sales, that something clicked in me. I no longer needed a man to have stability. I could be the basis of my own freedom. That's when the idea was born. One of the entrepreneurs, Anna, sold healthy lunch boxes, but couldn't organize the orders. I offered to help her set up a simple system in exchange for part of the profits. She agreed. The lunchbox exploded. Soon 2 more customers arrived. And suddenly I was helping small entrepreneurs organize their businesses and finances, something no one else was doing for them. I created a name, Restart Consulting. No capital, no team, no office. Just me, my broken cell phone, and the desire to prove that I could still be more than a label. My Instagram started to grow. The referrals came by word of mouth. And for the first time in a long time, I bought fruit for my kids without counting coins. I still cleaned houses. I still took the bus. I was still afraid. But now, I saw a way. And the sweetest thing of all, the name Ricardo began to fade from my mind. He no longer hurt me like before. Because now, I had something better than revenge. I had direction. But fate, with its sharp sense of irony, would make him see me again. And not like the woman kneeling in the kitchen, but as the woman he would no longer have the right to touch, not even with his eyes. The best thing about revenge is when it starts without the other person even realizing that they are being defeated. While he was flaunting his trips with his new girlfriend on Instagram, yes, he blocked me, but the kids' school friends were reposting it with barely concealed pleasure. I was quietly building my empire. Recommissar Consultoria started small, but the impact was real. The women I helped saw quick results and, more importantly, came back with a sparkle in their eyes. They recommended me to others, and soon I had a waiting list for appointments. It still wasn't enough money to live comfortably, but it was more than I had ever had on my own. With the first, more substantial amount, I bought a used laptop. With the second, I hired an intern, another single mother like me. I made a point. My growth would also be theirs. And then, something unusual happened. I was invited to give a talk at a local women's entrepreneurship event. Nothing big. Small, free, simple auditorium. But when I saw my name printed on a badge as business consultant, I cried. Not from sadness, but because it showed me that I had, indeed, been reborn. And that broken woman in the bathroom now spoke into a microphone, helped others, and taught them not to depend on anyone to exist. It was at this same event that a local journalist approached me. He said he liked what I said and wanted to write a story about mothers who reinvent themselves. I accepted, not knowing where it would lead. 2 days later, my story was published in a regional online newspaper. The article went viral. It was shared thousands of times, hundreds of messages, and among the comments and applause emojis, there was a private message that made me freeze. "You were always amazing. I was an idiot. Can we talk?" It was Ricardo. Blocked. Simple as that. But it sparked something inside me that I could no longer ignore. He was watching. He was beginning to realize. And that was just the beginning. In the following days, he tried again. He used another number. He sent a message to my work email. He said he wanted to see his children again, that he missed his family, that he didn't imagine you were so strong. Hypocrite. That same week, one of the mothers at school told me that he had been fired from the company. There were rumors of an affair with Priscilla, now his ex-secretary and ex-girlfriend. The scandal was ugly. And me? I smiled. For the first time, I really smiled. Because without him knowing, my rise was already overshadowing him. I started receiving invitations for interviews on local radio stations. I was called to help with a social project run by the city government. My consultancy was invited to participate in a call for proposals. And one day, I got a call from the coordinator of a national women's business acceleration program. They wanted me to be one of the mentors. A mentor. The woman who was left with $70 in her account. Now, national mentor. And it was in that same month that fate decided to play with me even more. I was invited to an event at a renowned business center. the same one where Ricardo used to work. And guess who was the last-minute canceled speaker? He. I was called to replace him. I accepted, with pleasure. When it was time for me to speak, the packed audience was waiting for me. And as I walked onto the stage, wearing a red blazer and shoes I had bought with my own effort, I heard the whisper, "She was Ricardo's wife. Look where she ended up." And smile, not out of vanity, but for justice. It was the beginning of the end of the version he told about me. Now, the world saw the truth, and he would have to swallow each lie, one by one. After that talk where I was called to replace him, things changed. Not just for me, but for him too. A few days later, I was called for an interview on a regional television channel. The presenter welcomed me with a warm smile. Today, a woman who represents the strength of thousands of Brazilian women, Helena Duarte, founder of Recomeçar Consultoria. My name echoed on the screen. My story was told. And when she asked me what motivated me to start it all, I answered with a firm voice and a direct look into the camera. Being left with 3 children and no money was not the end of me. It was my starting point. That night, the video went viral. My networks exploded. Hundreds of messages, invitations, closed contracts. But among all of them, one made me freeze for a few seconds. "I saw your interview. I messed up. I'm devastated. Can I call you? Ricardo." This time, I didn't block it. I just replied, "Now do you feel it? Keep feeling it." It wasn't spite. It was justice. But he didn't stop there. He started going to the children's school without warning. He would show up at the entrance, trying to talk to them, trying to show that he was there. The boys were confused, especially Lucas, who still remembered the nights of crying. I went to the management and made it clear. Any contact he had would have to go through me. I was the only one legally responsible. He had disappeared for almost 2 years. Now he wanted to show up? Because I had a career? Pathetic. That same week, I got a call from him. For the first time in years, he was crying. Really crying. He said he was unemployed, that Priscilla had left him, that he was sleeping on his mother's couch, and ended with, "You won, Helena. I wronged you. I wanted to at least see you. Talk." I took a deep breath. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that I could hear what was left of his pride crumbling. "Ricardo, you destroyed the woman I was, but it was the best favor you ever did for me." And I hung up, but he didn't stop. He started commenting on my posts with fake profiles trying to get attention. He sent flowers to the lobby of my building. Once, he waited outside my event with a bouquet. I left through the service door. He started crawling, literally. And the more he humbled himself, the more I realized true revenge was not in shouting or exposing. He was growing so much that he would have nowhere to hide from his own guilt. My achievements multiplied. I received an invitation to be a columnist for a national portal about female entrepreneurship. My consultancy became a startup. I raised investment. I was on the cover of a magazine. And then, the invitation that made me cry on the living room floor, with joy this time, keynote speaker at an international event on female leadership. In Lisbon. All expenses paid. Yes, Europe. The woman he left with 3 children and nothing was now an international reference. And when I went to get my visa, guess who was in line, waiting to be seen to try a work exchange? Ricardo. He saw me. He trembled. He smiled embarrassedly. And he had the audacity to say, "You look amazing, Helena. Really. I'm proud of you." That moment was magical. I looked into his eyes and said, "You cannot be proud of what you have abandoned. He who does not plant, does not reap. And whoever buried me, forgot that I was a seed." I left him there on the cold floor of the consulate, with his words choked up, trying to feign dignity while swallowing the bitter taste of regret. And me? I was just getting started. Lisbon. I had never even left the country. And there I was, standing tall on the white marble of an international conference center, with my name in gold letters on a giant screen, Helena Duarte, keynote speaker, How to Transform Pain into Leadership. Behind the stage, before going up, I took a deep breath and looked at an old photo on my cell phone. It was me, with my 3 children in my arms, sitting on the floor of the old room, surrounded by donation boxes, one day after the abandonment. My eyes, in that photo, were lifeless, and now, they were lit up like never before. When I went up on stage and saw more than 800 people in absolute silence, I didn't feel afraid. I felt justice. I told my story from beginning to end. No frills, no exaggerated heroism. I told the truth as it was. I told about the betrayal, about the empty account, on the cold kitchen floor, about cleaning bathrooms with a diploma in hand. But most of all, I talked about what happens when a woman decides to rewrite her own narrative. And at the end of the talk, with tears in their eyes, the audience stood up. Standing ovation. Some women came up to hug me as if they were sisters. And in a way, they were. The next day, the lecture was aired. Millions of views. And then the unthinkable happened. An investigative journalist recovered documents and printouts showing that Ricardo was embezzling money from the company where he worked and using his new girlfriend's name to cover up expenses. The complaint went viral. And who was there? Live on TV, commenting on business ethics. EU. Yes, I was called as an expert. I talked about responsibility, trust, values. And at the end of the interview, the presenter commented, "It's interesting to see that the name of the former employee under investigation appears in a story of overcoming that we all know. What a twist, right?" I just smiled. Without naming names, without needing to take revenge with words, because the world already did that for me. But the peak was yet to come. One afternoon, when I was picking up my youngest son from school, I saw Ricardo on the sidewalk. Thin, haggard, with a folder of resumes in his hands. He was waiting for me. He approached, head down, and tried to smile. "Helena, could we talk? I'm trying to get back into the market. You know so many people now. If you could help me with a contact." That got to me. For a second, I went back to that cold floor, to the hunger, to the muffled crying in the bathroom. But just for a second, I looked into his eyes, and calmly, I said, "You taught me how to survive. Now it's your turn, but don't count on me. The door you closed with contempt is now armored, and I am the key you will never have again." I turned my back and got into the car. My children were waiting for me, laughing in the back seat. Life went on, and the past was in the rearview mirror. After our last meeting, he never tried to talk to me directly again, but the world is small, and destiny, relentless. I learned from acquaintances that, after the scandal was exposed, Ricardo was sued by the company where he worked, the same company where he humiliated me for years. They tried to cover up the case, but the repercussion of my story had shed too much light on everything he tried to hide. He lost his reputation, he lost the apartment he bought with Priscilla, and he lost Priscilla, who not only left him but reported him. He was in debt. He was evicted. He returned to live with his mother, in a small house, at the back of the yard where he grew up. The same mother who, for years, said that I should be more submissive, that men are just like that. Ironies of life. Meanwhile, I kept growing. I was invited to publish a book about my journey. I titled it, From Silence to Stage, The Story of a Woman Who Didn't Break. She flourished. It became a bestseller. I was interviewed on national programs. I received tributes. I have won awards for leadership and social impact. And one day, I was surprised. During a major event in São Paulo, I was called to the stage to receive a Woman of the Year award for community impact. The audience gave me a standing ovation. And when I picked up the microphone, I saw at the back of the auditorium, Ricardo, sitting, among the crowd, alone, with swollen eyes. He didn't expect me to see him, but I saw, and in that moment, I understood. It was no longer hate that I felt. It was a shame, because he was there, surrounded by everything he ever wanted, prestige, power, recognition, but he was just a spectator. And I, the woman he had discarded as an anchor, was now the center of the light he had been searching for. During my speech, I did not mention his name, but I left a message for him, and for everyone watching. There are two types of falls, the one that destroys, and the one that teaches you to fly. I chose to fly. And to everyone who once felt too small, know this: it is not who abandons you that defines your value. It's what you do with the pain they left behind. Applause, tears, hugs, and he, motionless. Months later, I learned that he had tried to open a business, without success. Several mutual friends cut ties. His name, once respected in the corporate world, became synonymous with disloyalty. The only thing left for him was to watch. Watching my victories, my children growing up strong, my photos alongside celebrities, my company helping women all over Brazil. And later, in one of the last pathetic attempts to reconnect, I received an anonymous message. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. You are my home. Today I am just rubble. I read it. I took a deep breath, and I deleted it, because I no longer needed revenge. Life had done that for me, and even if he crawled to my door, she would never open up again. Today, when I look back, I no longer recognize that woman kneeling in the kitchen, begging for crumbs of attention. Pain shaped another version of me, no longer submissive, no longer invisible, no longer defined by someone else's surname. Today, I am Helena Duarte, entrepreneur, writer, mother, leader, and above all, a survivor who became a protagonist. But don't think that victory came without scars. I still carry scars, some on my skin, many on my soul. But they are the ones that remind me of where I've been, and they show me everything I've overcome. Ricardo was not just a man who betrayed me. He was the trigger for my revolution. Do I hate him? No. Hatred would consume me, and I refuse to be held hostage by anything that reminded me of him. Did I forgive? I don't know. Maybe forgiveness is just not carrying the weight of hurt anymore. And in that case, yes. Because today, when I look at him, I only see a man too small to have accompanied me on the flight that I became. My kids grew up watching me fight. They learned more from my failures than they would have learned from a perfect life. Lucas, my oldest, now helps me at events. Once, when I called him to share the stage with me, he hugged me and whispered, "You are my greatest pride, Mother. There is no greater prize than this." What started as a story of abandonment turned into a movement. We founded an institute that helps women in vulnerable situations to get back on their feet. We have already supported more than 2,000 stories, and every time a woman looks at me and says, "You gave me the strength to carry on," I know it was worth every tear. Yes, I was left with 3 children and $17 in the account. Yes, I was humiliated, betrayed, forgotten. But today I am the one he can't even pronounce without feeling ashamed. And ironically, it was the pain he caused me that gave me the wings he never had. If you are listening to me right now, somewhere in this world, going through something similar, don't accept being buried alive. You are not an end. You are the seed of something that will yet blossom, strong, beautiful, unstoppable. And if one day they ask you what happened to that abandoned woman with 3 children, reply with a smile, "She became the kind of woman no one ever leaves again."